Okay, so you get knocked out of IEM Sydney. Look, it is what it is. Moving on from that unfortunate result. And to be honest, actually moving on, I think through the vast majority of the order history, like you were in order for a long time. Yeah. There was lots of qualifiers, lots of events, as we've sort of talked about. You won like ANZ Champs season 3, 4, and 5, and probably did a bunch of other stuff there as well. But I think it's very easy to say that you were consistently a top 4 team. Is it fair to say that you were the best though? Like, what do you think in hindsight? Where would you actually rank this Kings roster?
After that IEM Sydney,
roster, I should say.
After that IEM Sydney, we started going downhill. I feel like this is obviously my perspective.
Yeah,
we started going downhill, and this is when Grayhound started going uphill.
Yeah,
and I think the first maybe 6 months of 2018, I think we were number 1.
Right.
And then I think we lost to Grayhound at Zen League. I don't know when that was. And then that was, I think, the deciding factor of, okay, we're probably second best. And then, I think that was the period of, beginning halfway through 2017 to midway of 2018 was when we dropped off.
I mean, that's very much what I've kind of got in my mind as well, right? There was like all these good results with Katowice and Sydney and qualifying and stuff like that. And then kind of for the rest of Order's history, like the only other really notable result was qualifying for ESL Pro League Season 8. And after that was kind of when Grayhound just sort of started to win everything. And, obviously that's that course of history now starting to take over. But I sort of wanted to ask you about like the 2018-2019 period of Counter Strike in ANZ. I remember quite fondly. Like I almost remember this as like the golden period of ANZ Counter Strike, because it did feel like there was 4 really solid teams with Order, Grayhound, Tainted Minds and Chiefs. So all those top 4 teams were like, it was a pretty competitive top 4. Felt like on any given day, any team could kind of potentially beat any other team. And even like the 4 to 8 teams were pretty good, if I remember right. Like I remember in that sort of 5th spot, we always used to call them like the gatekeepers of first was Legacy. Like any team that was kind of coming up, they would first have to beat Legacy and then they could try to challenge the top 4. So it felt like actually there was quite a bit of depth, down to the top 8.
There was a huge depth. You actually knew the players in each team. Generally, you knew each team after the 5th as well, like actual names of teams.
Like now, if you would ask me who's the 8th best team in Oz, I'd be like, well, who are there 8 teams in Oz?
No. We have John in IEM Sydney Qual.
That's not a real team.
John and us, and it's not really. There's no like team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's been together for ages. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Like beyond the top 3.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. So that was to me like a golden period, golden era. Not only because it was super competitive, but it also felt like there was a lot of opportunities. Like there was a lot to play in, lots of qualifiers, lots of chances to go overseas.
100%.
And salaries. I think the top 4 teams probably would have been salaried at the time.
Yes, I do remember. Grayhound being salaried. We were salaried. I remember Chiefs was salaried. Who was not? Who was the Tainted? They were salaried. Yeah, everyone was kind of...
even Legacy might have been getting something.
I think maybe.
Yeah, like it wasn't like a livable salary or anything like that.
But it's, it's getting something.
Yeah, so pretty good period, 2018, 2019. But, let's go into that point where Grayhound kind of starts to take over, because you're still on Order for a little while at that point in time. And it's maybe even reminiscent of, I guess, what we're dealing with today, in that like you're maybe the second best team or definitely within the top 4 and kind of competing for these slots, but it never feels like you really managed to get those slots anymore. So is that like a frustrating environment to sort of play in? Like, is it kind of tilting?
I'm sure the boys know this. I was back then. I was a bit of would I say toxic? I wouldn't say toxic, but I was probably irritating to play with, because I could feel this. I could feel that we weren't the same level.
Right.
So I was getting irritated with certain things that either people were doing or and it was kind of a bit silly, because also I wasn't really reflecting on myself too. So I was being more trying to get people to have a rocket up their ass, but I could also be self-analyzing as well to be better. Yeah. So everyone could be better. But I was definitely I was still 18 or something. So I was definitely trying to, get a rocket up people's asses to realize that, we're losing, right? And we need to be better. Yep. But I definitely went down more of the route of kind of not doing it in the right way. So that's something I had to learn about. But Yeah, definitely. I remember because I remember being frustrated personally, and I wasn't the best teammate at the time to play with. So
What's the mentality like when you're playing in that kind of an environment where you're seeing all of these opportunities go to another team and you're like almost on the cusp? Are you thinking like, yeah, if we're just a little bit better as a team, we can make this happen? Or are you at that point sort of starting to think, maybe if I play well enough individually, I get picked up for this team? Like, where's the thought process going at that point in time?
at that time in 2018, I wasn't thinking of going to another team. I was thinking of just improving the team because I knew we were good enough. But maybe our processes or, something was going wrong. I think later in 2019, I started to understand that, okay, I don't think I have, there's no more, we're at a limit.
Yeah, you
know
can't
what I mean?
get more out of that
At
team.
29, I wouldn't say, I can't remember I don't know what exact time, but definitely in 2019, I knew that we were at a certain limit, that we couldn't go any further upwards in terms of being better because it's just the players we had at the time and the way we're playing. And over a longer period of time, we haven't really,
Improved
or anything.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I just need to focus on myself at this point and just make sure I'm playing well and make sure I'm, doing the good things to be better.
Did you feel like you were better? I know this is almost like setting you up to sound like a really condescending dickhead, you know what I mean? But was there ever a sense in your mind where, like, obviously, as we know, you obviously went on to Renegades and you played in that team. So was there ever anything in your mind where you were like, you know what, I actually do deserve to have better results than this. I do deserve to be in a better team. Or
in 2019,
like
I'd say there was a period of time where I was playing really, really well. And I did feel like I was at a stage where I should be playing at a high level.
Yeah.
I definitely felt that. And it was more of a, I don't know what, it's like an instinctual feeling where because you have that feeling, that your confidence is just way higher.
Yep.
And you're playing, you're just playing at a high level.
That's what people always talk about, right? Playing with confidence. And like, you can kind of tell when a player is playing with confidence, like by the peaks that they take or the way that they just move around the map and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So it was definitely at that period where I knew I felt like I deserved a little bit more, but I wasn't really frustrated in any sense. I was just happy to be playing, focused on playing well.
Still getting paid,
whatever
right?
happens. But I wasn't really like, I need to be, and going crazy over it.
Yep.
I was just like, keep playing well, focus, make sure you're playing well. You're a good player, and just focus on that, and then
your time will come.
Yeah.
Inevitably, as we know, it did come. So we'll jump into the Renegades era now, and this is, I think, where most people are probably interested to hear from you. Like, this is, I would say, like the biggest moment of your career or the biggest period of your career necessarily. So you replaced Stacy. Is there like a moment where you feel like you've made it? Like, is this, or have you already kind of had that? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, you've been grinding away for, I don't know how long, maybe like 2-3 years at this point in time between Kings and Order at the top of AUCS, reaching that limit, can't go much further, but now you're in Renegades and now the door sort of opens up to go further.
Well, I couldn't really comprehend at the time because I remember I was in Dallas with Order at the end of 2019 because we qualified for MDL.
Yeah.
ECA MDL league in Australia, and you go overseas and play overseas teams. And at the time, that's when I got the offer when I was overseas by Mr. Grayhound, shout out. And at the time, I was like really excited, but I also didn't really understand how big it was because as soon as I got into the team, the first thing that happened is, we're going to Leipzig, we're going to Germany,
DreamHack,
straight into tournaments like that.
That's how it is, man.
You know what I mean? And that wasn't really comprehending with me because all it was you either qualify in Australia or you don't get invited.
Yep.
But they were at a level
where they were getting invited.
That, and also I feel like they took a turn from Grayhound to Renegades. They wanted, this is what I remember. They wanted a more professional approach.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be like proper serious.
Yep.
In terms of competing. So yeah, once we got invited to Leipzig, and I was like, okay, this is kind of crazy. I'm going, flying overseas straight away.
Yep.
Playing pretty decent tournaments. We're like at that general tier 2 level. So yeah.
Yeah, like the switch flips on and all of a sudden off you go.
Exactly.
Maybe it was a situation where it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind, right? When you're not getting those opportunities, like you're not really thinking it. Oh, they're actually overseas like more than 50% of the time.
Yeah, you don't think of what you don't think of what other people are doing. You're just focused on yourself.
Yep.
Until it starts happening to you, then you understand.
Then
okay,
you're like, holy shit,
this is what's happening.
They're on the good life, man.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was the good life in theory, and then as we know, obviously, like if anyone's following the state of the world at that point in time, we've just hit 2020. You go over to Leipzig, you go over to Katowice. I'm pretty sure you went from back to back or very, very nearly. But you're like literally right in the middle of COVID. And actually the situation is kind of developing when you're overseas,
Yes,
I remember.
Yes, there was emergency stuff on all over the news. COVID was going around. We're in Kato and we're going through Dubai as well on the way back. So we're going through a huge hub with all the, sickness and stuff.
Yep.
And the biggest worry for me was at the time was I didn't want to, because the whole world purported that you don't want to spread. I don't want to spread anything to my parents, right, or my grandma, because we were taking care of my grandma at the time. So it was pretty worrying. I mean, we were living in the Grayhound house, so it was okay, but yeah, it was still a bit of a weird time because we were overseas just at the start of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you kind of had to deal with at the time, like in terms of just like, do you remember if there was quarantines? I don't know if there was even quarantines at that point, or
no, there was nothing we had to deal with.
Stuff at
We were
events.
worried that we could have maybe not gone back home, but at the time they were accepting Australian citizens to come back.
Yep.
But we did see in Dubai they had like the sensors to sense people's temperature in the airport, and that was the start. So we were kind of like, okay, it's a bit weird. But yeah, there wasn't really any protocols.
Nothing
at
at events
time.
yet or anything like that?
No, not at that time. It was like early. It was just about starting.
Yeah, I can vividly remember that time because I've done a lot of these in retrospects with players that have sort of played. Like I did one with Malta initially, and I talked to him about this kind of thing, and it's like it was all sort of really weird about how teams were overseas and this situation was like popping up, and we're like, are they going to be able to come back? What happens if they do come back and then everything shuts down? And obviously, as we know, that's pretty much what ended up happening.
Yeah.
Before we kind of get into like 2020 and how that all sort of played out, I actually wanted to just ask you about like living in the Grayhound house, because like you did just briefly mention it there, and that was actually one of the unique things about Grayhound. Maybe not so much anymore, obviously, but at the time, like they were definitely the only CS team with a gaming house. But even as far as esports teams in ANZ, like there's very few, if any at all anymore, apart from maybe Chiefs, but like I know they don't actually even live at that house. What's the gaming house like? Because to be honest, if I think about a gaming house, this would be my worst nightmare. I really like my personal space. I like to be quite neat and quite clean and quite tidy. If there's any crumbs in the kitchen, it starts to piss me off. So I don't know. Was it different for you? Like, because I'm sure if you're with the boys, you're with your friends and stuff, maybe it's different. But
So it was weird because when we first, when I first moved in, it was everyone was there.
Yep.
Everyone was living there too. So it was 90%. Yeah. So everyone was living there. So it was me, Inns, Dexter, Sicko, and Malta, and then Mr. Grayhound. We're all living in the same house.
it's a lot of guys in one house.
It is a lot of guys.
Was it a big house? Like it
It was
like
a big house. It
pretty
was a
big.
big house. Everyone had their own bedroom.
Okay. Except Gratisfaction at one point. I think he was sleeping in like a hallway or something.
Oh yeah. So when I say bedroom, there was
Okay,
So there was one. It started off before I was in the team. They had like a little cardboard room. So
Great.
They sectioned off a room.
Yeah, thanks. That's
with
awesome.
a cardboard. But then Mr. Grayhound put in a curtain, so it became
Nice
the
guy.
curtain room.
Awesome. Who was in there?
Who was in the curtain room at the time? Oh my god. So Dexter was downstairs. I got Dick Stacey's room. Malta was in his room. was it Josh? I think it might have been. Yeah, it might have been Inns.
Now, how far has he come?
Yeah,
From
I think
being
it was
in the curtain room.
I think it was Inns, and then when Dexter left, Inns took the downstairs room.
Right.
But yeah, so Inns was in the curtain room. I was lucky enough to get Dick Stacey's room.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bit crowded. But at the time, I wasn't really thinking about all that. It was like get into CS.
It's just
right?
hype, man.
But it was an awesome environment because I felt like that I feel like that was a bit of an edge that we had over other teams as well because we were together and we're playing big tournaments together. And I felt like at the time it was definitely a bit of an edge. I feel like now the players are good enough to not have it, to just win.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time we were just felt unstoppable.
Were you like on pretty good terms with a lot of the players at the time, like prior to coming in? Because like you would have obviously played with Liazz. Was Inns in order at the time that you were in order as well?
Yes,
so you had that
we were together. We had that connection.
So were you like pretty friendly with everyone already before moving into the Grayhound house?
Yeah, so I knew Sicko
Or the Renegades house?
Obviously, yeah, I knew Sicko at the time, and I knew Inns at the time. Dexter it was probably my first time ever meeting him, and it was an interesting relationship
Okay, so here's where I want to kind of get in your mind and I want to give my thoughts because like I've spoken a lot to Dexter actually, more than most AU players, just because I've done one of these with him and I've spoken to him a couple of times in the past and like he always gave me like these vibes where he was like a little bit intimidating. Yeah, I feel like he was quite intimidating for players, especially because like he was almost like the king of AU CS at a certain point. Yeah, right? He like made or broke your career. If he decided, hey, you're in Renegades, like fuck yeah, like I'm in Renegades. But like, he was a scary guy, I think.
Yeah, so it's an interesting relationship to start
like,
off
not really,
with.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean because obviously the thing about Chris that probably a lot of people don't know, unless you've played with him, is that he's a very, very big perfectionist.
He's a serious guy.
Very big perfectionist. And he's not afraid to tell you that you've made mistakes. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid at all. And I think that's what you need if you want to be a good leader. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be performing at the highest level. So he was definitely one of those guys that, when you're playing, and you make I have actually a funny story, but it was definitely a period of time where I was kind of in the environment of playing and I was fitting in, but I didn't let myself really just really just be confident in myself. Okay, yeah, I'm in this team, right, for a reason. So that took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
For me, and I had a funny story. I was playing Pit on Inferno on CT, and we're versing Cloud9 at Leipzig, right?
Right.
And I like to call him Chris,
Dexter.
But Dexter's like, play headshot, right? Play headshot, which is mini pit, or you have the big pit, and then there's mini pit. We used to call that headshot. It's like play headshot on. It was against an anti-eco. It was against pistols, right? I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, right.
Okay.
And so I play headshot, and I'm just watching the Bauk drop off on CT, and they ended up doing a horse pop, of course, on pistols.
Classic.
I get one kill, die, and he's like, play. He typed in. I think he typed in. This was on LAN, by the way.
In team chat or whatever.
Yeah, and he was like, what did he say? He's like, please play Cirque every time on an anti-eco. So when he said headshot, he was meant to say Cirque,
right,
or big pit.
Okay.
But he said headshot, and he mistakenly. The thing about Dexter as well is that sometimes because he talks so much, he muddles up the words. Okay. So sometimes there might be a strat that he says that's not the right thing, or for that specific example.
Okay.
So because I made the mistake in his mind, he
blamed you.
Well, I wouldn't say he blamed me, but he's like trying to fix the mistake.
Okay.
But it was just a communication error, and he apologized afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's just a funny environment. That's the environment that I would like, that you're in.
Yeah.
Where I'm saying, okay, I'll play headshot.
Yeah.
Right. I asked if it was like if it made because it didn't really make sense,
yeah.
But I was still okay to put myself in a situation.
You're pretty new in the team, right? Like,
yeah,
you were like, maybe he knows something I don't, or something.
Yeah, or maybe there's a setup. I don't know. It's a bit silly, right? I should make my own decisions, but I'm also listening, to
you listen to your IGL, like,
of course.
Okay.
But then it ended up, it's just a funny scenario that we'd laugh about now.
Yeah.
But you can see the mentality there, right, outside the communication area, that Dexter is super serious about fixing mistakes and being on point, even if it's as little as, playing headshot on, an Antica.
Did you ever get the sense that when you were playing with these players, that they were a lot better than everyone else in Oz?
100%.
You get in the server and you're like, holy shit,
100%,
these guys just
100%. And it's not even about individual. It's 90% of it wasn't even obviously individual. The whole team structure, or the way it was set out, was basically, number one, the communication, and the way the communication made you understand what's happening on the map, having an outline of, when you're looking at the radar, you almost know where the other team is and what they're doing through communication. And that kind of made you make different decisions on the map. Especially for me, when I was playing on small side anchors, right? Yep. If Chris gets information somewhere and he's like, oh guys, there's nothing here, care your sites, right? Or, care a B pop or whatever, I'm throwing utility on, this is a good time to throw utility, right? Very simple example, random example, but that was happening 24/7 non-stop during the game. So it just made it very, very easy to play because you kind of knew what was happening. And maybe at the time the Aussie teams weren't at a crazy high level, but still we were playing at a level where consistently, when we're versing EU teams as well, like Heroic and stuff at that Leipzig event, and Cloud9 as well, we had this, it's just this basic understanding of playing CS, having good communication, telling people when there's nothing is also information, or what's going to happen on the map. Made it very, very easy to play, and made it easy to, I wouldn't say beat Cloud9 and Heroic and stuff, but you kind of had this confidence knowing what you're doing makes sense, and made us beat those teams.
Yeah. So I was just trying to quantify it in my mind. It's not necessarily that they're just sharper or they're just better in mechanical perspective.
I mean,
it's just
obviously the mechanical skill is up there, right?
Yeah.
And it's but mechanical skill will only take you so far. Yeah. And I think just
especially nowadays, right?
100%. And just at the time, just everyone was just very, very clicking. The roles made sense. Obviously, everyone's good individually, but communication, team, the way we're playing as a team, the way we're taking map control, just super, super, super good.
Well, the unfortunate reality for you was that 2020 ended up actually being a bit of a write-off, right? I've got, when I'm looking at my notes, there's 3 or 4 paragraphs for 2018, 2019, and then I get to 2020, and there's one small paragraph.
Nothing, yeah.
It's Hatz joins Renegades, and then, we talk about that, and then we talk about living in the house, and that's kind of it. There was obviously some local tournaments, some top 4 tournaments here and there, but outside of Leipzig and Katowice, which were pretty much in January, February kind of time, once you get back to ANZ, you don't go again.
No.
So it's kind of just okay, well, back to square one. Does this feel a little bit unfair? You've done the grind, you've done the ANZ grind. Now it's yes, I'm in my international team, and life gives you a little bit of a taste of what life could be like, and then it's just no, fuck you. You get to stay in ANZ for another year.
I mean, at the time, I didn't really think about it. And obviously now that we see 21 and 22, I did live the life even without Dexter, right? But at the time I didn't really think about it. I just it's interesting to think about, but didn't really think about it. I just thought about winning. That's, I don't know. It's just kind of a bit, I wouldn't say delusional, but just thought about winning. And didn't really think about anything else. Just being healthy and winning, that's really what I thought about. And I didn't think that was a cop-out or it's... I mean, we did have conversations, especially because at the time we had Mithr as coach. And he was saying, it sucks that we can't actually see the potential of this roster of what we can do, because obviously we had the event at Leipzig and we came second as a first event.
That was behind
together.
Big, right?
Behind Big, yeah. And Big in Leipzig, Germany. So that we had the crowd against us. That was another experience, which was crazy. But we did have conversations about it that it did suck, but it wasn't really on, or at least my mind, 20 or like heaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just one of those things.
What was Mithr like as a coach? Because I have him in my mind as I don't know, like obviously I've very rarely spoken to him. I did speak to him a little bit. I actually did an episode of Geographically Challenged with him, I think just after he left Renegades. But I have a fairly high degree of respect for him. I think, what he did with Renegades was quite a cool thing, because it's not often that you see someone actually fully put their mind to it when it comes to an ANZ team. It's like, you've had Renegades in their period of history has had a lot of coaches go through, and like none of them have really had the impact that Mithr did. So am I reading that correctly from the outside? Do you think he had a big impact on the team?
He did, and I think a big thing about Mithr as well is, number one, he worked well with Dexter, and number two, he kind of, how do I say this? There was a period of time in Renegades at the time where we slightly relaxed a little bit. We weren't as on edge with playing a lot and being crazy motivated, because obviously we couldn't go anywhere.
Hard to be.
And then we're scrimming in Oz, and it's just a bit, deflating. We're not really being too challenged, right?
Yeah.
But Mithr was someone that really put us in check with that sort of thing, and made sure that we're not putting the foot off the gas pedal, So that was one thing. And then obviously with CS as well, understood the game, helped us a lot. And he helped me a lot as well, because we got into a time, a lot of people don't know this unless you were in the team, that there was a time period it was like on Nuke or something, where I was playing ramp, and he was playing, I think it was in Scrim, where he was trying to tell me how to play a little bit, because he saw me not playing to my level. And then I kind of just had this talk with him to tell him not to kind of interfere with how I'm playing.
Right.
And then right after that, I started playing really, really well. But he was super okay with having those conversations as well.
Right.
He was someone, he had this thing called unpacking the backpack, where basically, every few months, every 3 months, we're talking about issues in the team, what people have issues. And there was one time where Dexter had an issue where he was a bit more irritated than normal in general. And he told us that he said that, he's doing a lot of work in terms of adding stuff, and he feels like when people aren't doing the right thing when he's putting all this effort in, then he feels like it's a waste of time.
Okay.
So the solution was, other people bring stuff, right? So then we, fix that issue a lot better, and then everyone's bringing stuff, and then, but yeah, Mithr also brought that environment where, you flesh out these sort of things, which is super good too.
Yeah. I think the reason that I kind of respect what he did with Renegades is that I think it would be quite easy to sort of phone it in his position, and I never really got the sense that was what he was doing. If you're an EU coach, you're coaching an Australian team remotely, I can see why people would just be like, oh yeah, I'm just here for the paycheck. But I never really got that sense from him.
No, he was super hardworking.
Yeah.
Super hardworking. It was really good to work with Mithr.
Yeah, he was good to talk to as well. He always gave good interviews. I remember when we did interviews, and I remember at that point it was like, fuck, I really don't want to do another interview, because we would talk to the same person every second week about, Renegades you beat Order again in another bloody top 4 tournament. Hatz, how do you feel about that win? It's like, pretty good, man.
Yeah, it's like there was times where we had because Mr. Ground always posts our winning thing from the house.
Yeah.
And after winning, we're like, yeah, we're just cool, but we're just not really.
It's another $10,000,
but it's just not
a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, it's not really.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, let's jump forward. We've actually talked a lot more about 2020 than I thought, but I think that was kind of interesting, context as to how Grayhound as a team sort of functions. But it sort of very quickly changes, obviously, in 2021, which is where Dexter departs. Like you alluded to this, that you never really actually got to play under Dexter properly, at least not for an extended period of time internationally. It's kind of where I want to go, but. I want to know what sort of changes that brings to the team, because from the outside, again, it did sort of feel like as soon as Dexter left, there was not only that, Mithr leaves, obviously. And as a result of Mithr leaving, that's kind of why Dexter ended up kind of leaving as well, because he went to Mouse and then Dexter went to Mouse. So it's like two birds, one stone initially. And that's like your two biggest points of direction, I would say, in the team. Like your coach goes, then your IGL goes. And like most people would pretty much say, okay, Dexter's like the number one IGL coming out of ANZ in the modern generation. And like obviously there's arguments to be made about Azza and Sponge and maybe these kinds of players. But like certainly he was a huge impact on that Renegades roster. And then he's gone alongside Mithr. So what does that actually do for the team? What does that change? Because instantly, obviously, someone has to step into the IGL shoes, and I look at it and I think again from the outside, it sort of seems like there was not like a direction necessarily missing in the team, but it just seemed like something was lacking in the team, and there wasn't like an obvious person to kind of fill those shoes necessarily.
At the time, Malta wanted to step up to IGL.
Yep.
But we were still. But he said he wanted to. Mm-hmm. But we're still open to the idea of picking up an IGL. So we just had that conversation. You know, do we want to pick up an IGL? I think at the time we were looking at Jara because he was in order, and that was second best team. Mm-hmm. And then it was either that or we pick up Ali, which was in general the best player at the time. Or I think maybe we were also looking at Hazza potentially from when I think about it as a rifler. But those were our thoughts. And then it got to a point where I think Malta was like, look, I'll just IGL. And then we ended up getting Ali.
Yep.
And we had, Malta IGL for a bit. And then, that was pretty much how it went down.
So why Ali? Obviously, again, it's the same conversation because like you've already got an AWPA in Sicko.
Yeah, so... The weirdest thing is, right, and this is obviously nothing against Ali, right, but I don't know why we didn't really think about the role in the point of time.
Yeah. It's the same story.
Yeah, same story. And we didn't really think about the role. We just thought about who's playing well. And at the time Ali was playing well. And we didn't really think about the role for some reason. I mean, we did in a sense, right? We were looking at other players, but I think we also knew Ali. I think that had a bit of a effect on it too. And I think that's just how it happened, really. I think we were just trying to make sure the core five of the five players were all super strong, you know, and Ali was playing well. And
I mean, I guess you can't at this point argue against that pickup, right? Because he gets picked up in 2021. He's still there now in 2023, so he must have done something right to kind of stay in the team. So it's obviously not a bad pickup per se. Obviously, you know, if we go into like some of the results that you guys then had, I think you can kind of note that the results were like a bit like, okay, well they're still good, but they're not like popping off so much necessarily, right? You went to IEM Katowice 2021, which is the third year in a row for you, obviously barring 2020. Anyway, whatever. You go there, the results weren't really anything particularly special necessarily. Same with like ESL Pro League Season 13, which again, you know, it's just like, okay, now Renegades is at that point where they're going overseas and like playing the events, but like it's not going necessarily anywhere super exciting until you get to Cologne 2021 where you're playing in the play-in. And this is the one where I want to sort of touch on a little bit more, is that you make it out of the play-in, you play against MIBR and you beat OG as well. I think this was like the deepest you actually ever went in a top tournament. So was this like a big moment for you?
That was a great event. That was so the first few months Malta was IGLing and then it wasn't really working out. So then Inns, it was like, you know, effort, whole IGL and make it work.
Yep.
And it ended up working out well. And then it also got to a point where it was like, we're not really playing too well. And we were kind of feeling this, and Sicko was feeling this as well. So Sicko, we were like maybe going to bring it to Sicko, but we didn't want to bring to him to, you know, give up the AWP role to Ali. But then he brought it to us and was like, look, I think it would be way better for Ali to AWP and then me to rifle. Because Sicko still has the hybrid style where he can rifle, right? He's a good rifler, and obviously a good AWPer. But I do feel like Ali is more leaning towards the
Yep,
AWP,
yep,
right?
yep.
So it made more sense. And as soon as that happened with that switch, and then Josh Inns went to IGL role, then it came into 2021 IEM Cologne after a bit of prac, and then we were solid. And then that tournament was just a really good tournament in general. I think we were just playing really, really well.
Something just clicked.
It was just everything was clicking. We were the thing about OG as well. Yeah, everything was clicking. We're playing very similar style to how we used to when Dexter was in the team as well. We're just playing off information and playing super well, and everything was clicking, and then we played Navi in the first game of Cologne as well, and that Inferno we played, I swear that was like the best Inferno we've ever played in our lives, in terms of just reading the game.
What do you put that down to? Like, I remember, it doesn't really come up as often these days, but I remember like honeymoon period being a really big talking point for like a few years in ANZ CS. Like every time a team would change their roster and then like play pretty well, everyone would be like, oh yeah, it's a honeymoon period. They're just playing well because they're like a new team, and I don't know, maybe other teams don't know how to play against them, or they're just like having a good time. There's no pressure, whatever. I guess it's not necessarily the exact same case because like at this point you'd been a team for a little while, but as you said, you sort of just recently made a change in terms of the roles within the team. Do you think it was maybe something like that?
Definitely something like that, because every time you bring a player in, right, and you're playing, like some things aren't going to mesh, and you still need to figure certain things out, what people like.
Yep.
Individually, and you can even see in today's Grayhound that some roles have been switched around between Vexi, and it's just it's not about nothing's bad. It's just about finding what
like refining
people,
it.
Just refining it, and what people are better at doing in certain situations, and definitely refining. That's a perfect word for it. So that was that period, that beginning of 21, where we're just refining things and making sure everyone's comfortable and everyone's super super solid.
Yeah, I mean, and then you go into the PGL major, right? This would have been your first major.
Yes.
So big deal, obviously, for you. I can't even remember the circumstances. This must have been like a RMR qualifier, or a, like as in not even a qualifier necessarily. You would have been invited based on regional points or something like that. I don't think there was a minor.
That one wasn't a qual.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I think so.
So they based it off 2020 RMR, and then also I don't know if it was purely off RMR as well. I think there might have been some other things at it. Maybe it was. But yeah, we had more points than order at the time, so we got directly invited, it's kind of crazy to think about when it's a major.
So just have some stickers in the game.
Yeah, well, that major was just
or was
the
that
team
not
sticker.
The point?
That was only teams. If you made top 8 in the playoffs, then you get your individual sticker.
So it wasn't at that point yet.
So it wasn't at that, but it's still obviously
still cool, yeah.
That was probably like I loved IEM Cologne 21, like in terms of CS wise.
Yep.
In terms of, I mean, CS was okay for the Stockholm major, but everything outside of the CS, like food,
it was another
the
level.
Area, crazy, and we also, because we lost, we had another and we got to stay the whole period of the whole major. So we stayed for like 2 weeks in Stockholm for free. It was like amazing.
Yeah. I guess, what was it like? Okay, here's a good question. How many stickers did you buy? Like, when you're like, okay, these are like, Renegade stickers are in the game already, but like, how many? These are mine. You know what I mean? Like, this is the event that I played at. Did you just go on a massive spree, or?
So when we were going to Stockholm, I don't know if we boot camped. Oh, it's hard to remember. But we were taking a train from either Denmark.
I think I saw this video on your Twitter.
Yeah.
You were like opening stickers.
Yeah, I was opening
something?
stickers on my laptop on the train. Yeah. And that was when the stickers came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, was buying heaps. Just like this is
like living in that euphoria. Or
100%. And it's like, and then it starts hitting you. Okay, you're actually playing at a major.
Yeah.
And then you get there, and it's just a different vibe. Majors are always a different vibes with teams. It's not like I mean, obviously tier 1 events, IEMs and all that, but major is like just different.
You can kind of feel it.
You can feel it.
Everyone's
100%.
taking it a bit more seriously.
Yeah, it's definitely different. This is my perspective.
Like, are people like kind of friendly at other events? Like, I mean, okay, this is maybe a little bit not necessarily the right question, but like, I assume when you go to another event, like people are like chilling, hanging out, like everyone's, you know, whatever. You're in the player room.
All the other players are super friendly.
Just chilling. But is it a bit different at the major? Everyone's like, okay, we're fucking serious now? Or, like, are you still vibing
people
with
are still
everyone?
friendly, but there's just a vibe. There's just a vibe in every aspect that is different. Like people yelling after rounds.
Right.
When you're just setting up, you can hear the yelling different. The way people are walking. It's not the fun. Like you won't see as many people joking around when they're walking to like you just little things just slightly different.
It's a little bit more serious.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. I mean, results wise, like you said, it wasn't amazing, but it wasn't awful necessarily. You beat Payne, but you ended up getting knocked out by Dexter's mouse as well, 1-2. So was there ever any
Well, that event was. I felt like I was, funnily enough. Before that Mouse series, I was playing really, really, really well, and I just had this nice routine going on.
Yep.
And then that Mouse game was just ended up being was that 3 maps?
Yeah. 1-2.
Which was like, again, it's one of those things that every time you lose, you always feel like you should have won or you could have won.
Sure.
And again, it was that same scenario where we thought we could have won, but. Yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Did it hurt more because it was against Dexter?
A little bit.
Like, did you go into that being like,
No.
we're going to fuck him up?
Not really, but the thing about Dexter is that we knew how he called as well. So, and we knew his style. He was like a bit more slower, taking my control, all that. So we had a sense of knowing, what to expect.
Yep.
And then we didn't capitalize fully or execute fully on that. So that was like the disappointing part. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as first majors go, I guess at that point you're probably just still happy to be playing at a major. It doesn't really matter what the results are necessarily.
We took a map off, and we're super close against Movie Stars. Well, 16-13, some game we should have won. Yeah, and yeah, it is what it is. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump forward to the point where Malta departs the team. So I've kind of heard this from his perspective, but from your perspective, what were like the circumstances behind this change? Was it just like results maybe weren't quite where you wanted them to be with the team?
I think at the time it was just for Malta, it was a bit more on the attitude side. But other than that, that was pretty much basically it. Just the vibe, just the vibes playing and all that just weren't good vibes, and it wasn't really enjoyable to play fully. So I think that was the main reason, and that's just how it goes sometimes.
The way I remember it, obviously, this was when like Extremum kind of fell apart a little bit. Yeah. And everyone was like, okay, Liazz and Gratis Faction are open, AZA's open, JKS had already gone over to Complexity and whatever was going on there. But there was very much like an expectation, like, okay, if Grat and Liazz are both available, there's a pretty high likelihood you could expect to see changes within the Renegades roster. So was that kind of a contributing factor? Like, was it like, okay, well, we can actually get...
Not really. Liazz? Not really. We weren't really thinking about who we were getting. We were just thinking about... Because the thing about that time period was that we were pretty... I think we were pretty... I wouldn't say burnt out, but we just weren't enjoying the game. And we just had like... We had 2 back-to-back tournaments in Sweden, and we were there for like 2 months straight. And we were just like... Not fully working out, not eating healthily properly. Mental was out the window. Yep. So, people were a bit more irritated, and then everything on top of that. And then, we just kind of wanted to have better vibes in the team. Sure. And then work out the roster afterwards. So
was there ever actually a conversation when that Extremum roster fell apart to say, okay, well, do we want any of these players? Because, like, again, like I'm saying from the outside, that
not really
literally looks like what would have happened.
Not really, because we knew Extremum at the time it would have been a huge buyout, right?
But they were like falling apart. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean the roster would have fallen apart, but they're all under contract.
Oh, they're still under contract.
Yeah, they were still under contract.
Right. Yeah.
So we knew that it would probably be pretty hard to get any of them in general.
Yep.
We just knew that.
Yeah.
So, and I think the buyouts were pretty large. So, yeah, it wasn't really fully. I mean, we knew Jay was there, but we knew it would be hard.
Okay.
So it wasn't really like, oh, let's go get Liazz
Yeah.
kind of thing. It was just, let's work out, the roster, and then we'll work out who to get afterwards. You know what I mean?
Sure. Who's kind of like, I mean, this is one thing I've always been interested in, because like obviously I've never played in like a pro CS team or anything like that. But how does this kind of conversation even happen? Like when you're at the point where you're like, okay, we're going to remove a player. How does, like, is there like this little, because obviously like that one person doesn't get to be involved in that conversation. So how does,
so
is there someone calling the shots in the team, or is it like the 4 other people somehow like get together and go like,
I don't know how much I don't know how much I can say in terms of.
I don't want it to be like
no.
Like
I want this to be fully transparent as possible.
Sure.
Because I don't really have anything that's holding me back to say anything. I'm just thinking like contract, because there's certain things in people's contracts, right, that say they have a determining factor.
Okay.
Who goes and who stays,
Right.
And I'm pretty sure, I think maybe Josh and Mr. Grayhound had that in their contract, but I don't know exactly. I can't remember. So I think that might be, well, that's legal, right? But that's not really how it goes.
In general, like there's always someone who's like
so there's usually the way it starts is like just small complaints, right? Small complaints from one person to another, right? And then everyone kind of gets an understanding of, okay, this is a bit of a problem. So then someone talks to someone else, and then eventually gets to everyone, that everyone's similar on the same page. So then one person's like, okay, let's talk about this. Right. And then what do we do? Do we be transparent to be like, look, this is what's happening. We need
have an intervention or something.
We need you to, right? And I think that happened, right? And we need you to fix this. This is just an issue, whatever, as teams should, right? But then if it continues and all that, then it's like, okay, we'll have another conversation. But it starts off with little small complaints between 1 or 2 people, and then if it comes consistent, then eventually it comes around.
It's a bit of a slow build, right?
Yeah, it's a slow build.
I wanted to ask you about how your sort of role changed within the team as well when Malta departed, because I feel like I remember like he was taking a lot of the supportive roles, right? And then it sort of ended up being you ended up taking a lot of those kinds of roles, or?
So it was weird because at the time, so Liam was playing supportive roles and I was still playing supportive roles, but I was on the T side. I was mainly playing taking space role, kind of / entry. When Liazz joined, what happened was he took, whose roles did he take? So I was still playing supportive roles, but Jay got given a lot of this freedom. So he played rotator roles, he played all that stuff. But then we realized that there was a bit of issues with like communication. Jay's a little bit more quiet of a player. And there's some roles where you need to kind of relay information about what's not happening and all that. So we kind of felt like we need to switch that a little bit. So there was a bit of a switching around when Jay did come into the team, just so things could work out a bit better and mesh better. It's just one of those refining moments again. It's just how it works, because at the time when we did pick up Liazz, initially we were looking at Vexi. But then there was like a big kerfuffle with a super team potentially being made.
I think I heard about this.
With
Order?
With Justin and Order. So I think Declan was hesitant to join us because he was going to make a team with them, and then eventually we ended up picking up Liazz. So yeah, we're still working out. We knew at the time when Liazz joined, we wanted to give him all the freedom, and then we realized over time that I was generally happy to swap roles in general just to make the team work. That's just the type of player I was. Even if I get put on small side anchors or big anchors, it doesn't really matter as long as the team is working well and we're winning. That's all I really care about. So yeah, he was playing a bit more freedom roles, and then he got put in supportive roles, and I got put in supportive / half freedom, half supportive. Yeah, it was a bit weird.
I want to kind of understand the mindset or the mentality that you have to be that kind of player, because surely it must grate on you a little bit. Like when everyone talks about Renegades, like, or any team, and it's not just specifically a youth thing, but like every team, there's like this player that someone always talks about. Like, let's just take Renegades right now for an example. It's like you talk about Renegades, you talk about Vexar, you talk about Ins.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, no one's really talking about Sicko. Unless they're like, oh, Sicko's not that good. Like, kick him, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
Like, does that ever kind of grate on your mind? Because I feel like you might have gone through some sort of period like that where you were, you weren't like the superstar in Renegades. Like, people would see you and be like, yeah, Hatz is all right, but like,
yeah,
we don't care about Hatz. We want to see like Ins. We want to see Dexter, whatever. You know what I mean?
What people don't... So there's multiple answers to this.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is that a lot of the time, if you go play... I mean, this is the role, right? This is the role that you accept, right? You don't really give a shit about how you look. You're doing what you're supposed to do in order to win the game, right? So if that means you're jump spotting a B apps on Mirage, right? And they come waterfall out Palace, all the terrorists with Glocks, right? And the con player gets all 4 kills, right? Obviously, over time, right? If you put that on a 50 map basis, right? In general, your con player is going to have more action, more chances to get kills. Potentially, your con player is going to look better, right? But it's not about how people have this thing, and it's just about entertainment of watching.
Yeah.
People want to see cool plays, all that, and that's a part of it, right?
Yeah.
But with the con position, right, you obviously want to put someone has high impact there, right, to do the role. Yeah. And whether that's getting kills, eco kills, a part of that, of course, awesome. But then there's the side of it where you might be playing B on Mirage and you're retaking A majority of the game. That's happened to me before, right? And you're playing in these scenarios where it's a 2v3 and you're in a situation where you're kind of looking for a kill, but it's very hard to win the round.
Yeah, if you get the kill, maybe it's on.
Yeah, maybe it's on, and you gotta play timings really into like particular situations. It's very hard sort of and then the next round they might B pop and you're blind and you have to use your util really well and you need to get 1 or 2, right? Different role, right? And obviously that's not going to be something that's going to be showcased a lot, but you can see when you do play that well, right? Someone like Perfecto, you can understand the impact that it has when you do. So that's the kind of the barrier between when people are watching and when people are actually playing. They don't understand the entertainment versus actually playing that kind of that level in between. So that's the one thing. And I did have this. One of your questions was, did I have this issue with? Yeah,
it's just like public perception or anything like that, where people are like, oh, this player's not good, but it's more like of a role thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So there was this. I usually never care about that shit anyway, because if I'm coming really well, throwing good util, and I'm anchoring stuff, then I don't really give a shit. And I'm also, the thing about me is that even though when I came up in the scene, I was playing like these roles where like high impact roles, whatever. If I can let Ins and Ali and whoever play in their comfort roles and perform at a high level, right? Then I'm happy with that.
You're doing your job.
Yeah, I'm happy with that because everyone is playing at their peak, and if I can do the dog shit but do it well,
makes their life easy, right?
Yeah, and I have that kind of nature of, even if I'm put in shit situations, I still make the most out of shit situations. I think it's like a personality thing. It is a personality thing.
I sort of see that a little bit in myself, where like if something, and this is just in life in general, it doesn't have to be in game, but I feel like maybe this is something that you deal with as well. It's like if I don't like something, generally I don't make an issue out of it. I just grin and bear it.
100%.
It's like, I don't know, what's an example? Like if you're at an airport and like someone's like got their elbow on your window, it's like, oh, like
you're either you're resilient to it, or you do something to fix it, but you're not
Like I'd rather put myself out than inconvenience someone else. Is generally like, and I don't know why. Like that's a really weird thing to do. It's like when you think about it, it's like I should do what's best for me. But sometimes I'd look at it and I'm like, you know what? Let bygones be bygones.
It's a double-edged sword because it can go down a twisting spiral of you're slowly losing confidence in yourself.
For sure.
You're not really looking after yourself. So that's why you got to. It's just a hard role to play, you know. And I think you just have to look at it objectively and basically just really analyze your decision making and just think about playing well. That's all it is to it. So, but in saying that, I had one thing to say. An interesting how you had the perception, if I've ever gone through that kind of idea of the only time I usually don't care, but there was one time basically when we got transferred from Renegades to Order. The Order management wanted to get Vexite in the team, right, at the time, and we didn't want that, right? We didn't want to make roster changes. But then we kind of heard this and I was like, they're like pushing to get Vexite and then I'm just like thinking to myself, okay, and this is purely my fault, right? But this is just the self-psychology. I'm like, okay, if they did want to get Vexite, who would they remove, right? Yeah. And I'm like, logically, right, everyone in every role makes sense, except for me it does make sense for me and Vexite to swap. Yeah. Right? Because aggressive rifle on the T side, yes, I play small anchors, right? And supportive, but it can be swapped there. So that was one thing that kind of played on my mind and I let it affect me. And that was one thing that I learned in that period. I mean, I am skipping time a bit, but that was one time I did let the confidence thing affect me.
Hey guys, just at the end of this video, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Jean, who is my first supporter on buymeacoffee.com. If you'd also like to support me financially or any of my content, make sure to check out the link. It is in the description box below.